Hey guys, and welcome back. So today I wanted to go ahead and talk a little bit about the gem tuning system. We're finally getting some details now about how this is going to work in Lost Ark in the near future. And so I wanted to go ahead and talk about it, as well as some of the talking points that people are having about it, and just kind of looking at it from both a user perspective and from the developer's perspective. So first, really quick, let's just go talk about what the gem tuning system is. So a gem tuning system is going to be that you bind your gems to your character and you can get a roughly 50% increase to the attack power bonus. So we can see from here, from full level 8s, you go from 8.5% to a 13.2%. And then full level 9s, you go from 11% to 16.5% additional AP. Before we go any further, I just want to be totally open and transparent. I only benefit from the system. Only benefit. So when I talk about it and I critique it, I really want you to understand that I'm coming from a standpoint that I only benefit from the system, but I can still objectively, and I'll tell you here and now, it's a bad system. It's a bad system even though I only benefit from it. And having that kind of understanding, being able to take a step back and look at something and say, okay, this is only positive for me, but it's still bad, is really important for trying to give feedback. So it shouldn't really come as any surprise that that is going to be a damage increase, especially for players who already have those gems and they aren't moving them back and forth. However, this system is very clearly designed to target players who were sharing gems. And we do know that there are many players across all of Lost Ark who run multiple of the same characters in order to increase their gem efficiency, right? That is a normal thing, and actually something even people recommend or had recommended previously to this point. And so there were a lot of people that were, 6 Glavers or 6 Bards or whatever, or even like 3 and then 3. So lots of different variations there. But this is something that was very clearly designed to target those players as well as the players in Korea who have been actually going out of their way and trading gems, full sets of gems, to other rosters, just kind of borrowing them back and forth. There is one more thing I did forget to mention, but it's not really going to be the focus of this video. It's the ability to turn gems from cooldown to DPS and back and forth. And while that is a nice quality of life, I actually think that that system could be completely separate from the system that we're talking about right here, right now. I don't think there's any reason why the power gain, which I think is the more important part, needs to even be tied to the transferring of gems from DPS to cooldown whatsoever. That's just a nice added bonus. I think that it's just maybe like an extra perk to just like kind of be cognizant of as we're kind of talking through this. I think the main focus for why people are upset and worried about the system is the power gain. One more thing is that they are adding a cooldown to switching back to regular gems, so they don't always have to be bound. It does seem like you have to pay a price if you don't want to wait the cooldown, and the cooldown is going to be 7 days, meaning that you wouldn't be able to share within the same week. And then we're not really sure what the cooldown cost is if you want to pay to skip it, but it will be blue crystal of some kind. I think ultimately the reason why people are kind of so annoyed by this situation is because this is choices that people made long ago. It's not like people have been doing this recently. Maybe the trading gems in KR thing has been more recent, but people have made multiple rosters or multiple characters of the same roster for a while now. And some people were even doing that at the start of the global release, a long time ago. And so they made that choice because of the game design, and in doing so, maybe decided not to play characters that they thought would have been interesting or have experiences that they would have enjoyed, right? Maybe not everyone wanted to play an alt roster, right? A full, single characters or whatever. Maybe they felt like they were obligated to do it because that was the only way that they could feel like they could compete or to be gem efficient. And so this is something that they're saying, okay, well, now that you've made those decisions a long time ago, and there's no way for you to really change those decisions right away without spending mass amounts of gold, now we're going to punish you for it. And that's ultimately why they're kind of upset. And technically, Smilegate is not deciding to punish these people, right? But you have to also understand that this system actually does do that, right? When everyone around you, everyone who's not like heavily affected by the system, is going to be getting a 3, 4, 5% damage gain, and you don't, you are being punished, right? If everyone in the room gets a candy bar except for you, then you are being punished. They're not being rewarded, you're being punished, right? Um, and that's just kind of the way that it will look from you. Everyone else will feel like, "Oh, look, we got a reward," and you will feel like you're being punished. There's a lot of different viewpoints when it comes to this particular topic, and there's a lot of different things to consider. So you have your, regular casual players who didn't play the same characters on they weren't sharing gems. And so they will probably only get to benefit from this. We don't know for sure if event gems will be included. I imagine a lot of the more casual players are going to be using event gems. Hopefully they do have the ability to use the event gems, but we'll have to see. And so hopefully those casual players will get to benefit from the system as well. But there are also casual players who might have made the decision to do this because they are casual, right? And so if they made the decision to make, 6 blades or 6 bards or whatever to be gem efficient, that might have been part of their casual playing, right? To make it easier and so that way they can keep up with their friends. They didn't have to have the same level of investment. That is something we have to take into consideration, right? It's not just the Giga Whales, the Captain Jacks that are running, 3 Glaviers with like full level 10 gems. We also do need to consider the casuals who are playing, who are just trying to keep up with their friends, because that's a very normal thing, especially in MMOs. Most people don't casually play by playing, the same game for 30, 40 hours a week or whatever it is. And most players don't log in daily if they're casual either. You have to remember, casual players, I want to say probably closer to like, will log into a game maybe 2 or 3 days a week for a few hours. And that is kind of like I think the golden standard of what being a casual player means. And even then, I think that that's probably higher on the end of casual. The hardcore obviously are going to log in every single day and do their dailies and do their UNA's tasks and everything like that. But that's not what casuals are, and that is the majority of your player base, even in a game like Lost Ark. I know it can kind of feel like, at least in the West, most of our players are not casual, and I would say that that's true, but that's because of the size now of our player base. Pretty much only people that are left in the game are more hardcore. So it does kind of narrow its head, more focused to the like what would be the top end of the pyramid, right? In KR, they still have a large player base, and so they will naturally have a lot more casuals than what we have over here in the West. That kind of mindset does extend to not only, the casual players, but also to the dolphins and then even the hardcore and the whales. They all made decisions based on how they wanted their progression to go. And some people definitely made the decision to make classes of the same type to be more gem efficient and therefore be able to spend more of their gold elsewhere. That's ultimately who this is like really punishing. As a developer, one thing that you should always strive for is that when there does become some kind of trend or some kind of, you know, way that your users go around a system, well, one, you should try and fix that system because obviously if the users are going around a system that you made, it means that there's a pain point there, right? That's pretty obvious, I think, for most people. There is a pain point here. It's that gems are too expensive. And so the way that players have gone around that is by, using gems on multiple characters. And so when you do have a system like this that people have been going around for a long period of time, it's really, really important that you don't change policy immediately, right? Even if you decided to, full steam ahead, full power ahead or whatever with this idea, with these changes that very much target those players, you would still want to give them ample time to adjust or at least prepare for this. Unfortunately, it doesn't really seem like they're really doing that. And I think anytime that you make decisions that are going to really negatively affect your users like this, maybe it's worth going back to the drawing board and seeing if there's a better way. Because, something I always try and say is that there always is a better way. It's just whether or not you want to do it, right? Or you can do it. And in this case, like, I think a lot of people have known that there are better ways to do this, right? People have talked about having roster wide gems and stuff like that. And while that might be better for the player, that's not better for Smilegate. And Smilegate can say, it has to do with the player's investment of their gems or whatever. This is a video game for fun. This is not a 401k, and there have been plenty of times, even in Smilegate's history with Lost Ark, where players in quote unquote invested in books or whatever, and their investment was completely lost, right? There were players that bought grudge books for 90k gold for when they were legendary way back in the day, right? Or whatever it was. Those players still quote unquote invested, or they bought card packs or whatever. But there comes a point when you have to stop looking at things as an investment and understand that you're naturally going to lose that investment, especially in a video game. The idea of investing in something that is only going to go down in time is the opposite of an investment. If you understand how books work in this game, if you understand how gems work in this game, you should understand that you can't really invest in those things because it's only a matter of time until they go down in price, right? Everyone's waiting to buy books right now, and that's the only reason that books haven't gone down in price yet. But once the market does eventually end up getting flooded, we end up getting a lot more resources or availability of those resources, right? So as more raids come out, we get more relic books. You will naturally see those relic books drop in price. Adrenaline will no longer be 350k. It will drop not necessarily overnight, but it will drop in price. And that is the opposite of an investment. An investment would be to have it grow over time. But that's not what any of this stuff is going to do. And that's never been what any of it could do, if that makes sense. You're investing in your account, not in gems, not in books. You're investing in your account to have a more completed account, to be able to do more damage and be able to have more fun in while you're playing your account. Also, man, I'm just saying for real, if you guys wanna, if people are looking to invest in their money, go play the stock market. Go do literally anything else other than buying virtual goods in a video game. You're not investing in yourself when you're spending money on Gacha or Lost Ark. It doesn't matter what it is. Don't spend money in video games for an investment. Something you also have to understand, we also need to take into consideration is that this is a free to play game, right? So naturally, there are going to be whales that are keeping the servers alive. They're paying the bills, right? But to some degree, I mean, like literally, the director literally just said in his previous broadcast that they were like screwing over the whales, right, with their Esther weapons, and so they need to do a better job of not doing that in the future. Like it's really odd to me that there's this whole idea about investment in the gem market and stuff like that that they need to protect and they need to feel good about, but it's fine to screw over the biggest of the leviathans, right? Like above whale is like the leviathans, the people that have the Esther weapons, and they're getting screwed over, and it's just kind of like okay, and everyone just accepts it, and people still buy Esther weapons and shit. Like it's crazy to me that they're that worried about this idea of investment. And as I said before, it's not investment. It's not. Like people can call it whatever they want, but if you're investing in something that's depreciating value, one, you're bad at investing, and two, you should just find something else. Go play stocks or something, like I said. But more importantly, like there does need to be, getting back to the point, there does need to be a way for whales to buy something, right, that they feel like spending that money is worth it on. And I think that there are ways that they could have gone about making changes to the gem system, which would have made less enemies, but maybe resulted in less profit. And here it seems pretty obvious that what they decided to do is they decided to screw over their players in order to make more profit, which is kind of normal for a company, but also is only normal for a company until your players get pissed off enough, you know? Like, I actually think what's going to end up happening is they're going to have to walk at least a portion of this back and maybe make another alternative or a just significant changes to the system overall. Something that I've seen in my own Discord is a lot of people are saying, well, you don't need, these really high level gems to clear the content. You can clear the content with like full sevens or whatever. And that's true for our version of the game. I don't know how true that is for the KR version of the game. And my understanding is that, we have things like the frontier system. So for us, if somebody dies in hard Brel or whatever, it's kind of okay at this point. But if you think back to when we were progging at the beginning of hard Brel or whatever, right? You have to realize that that was even a nerfed version of the raid that than what they had, what they were doing for a farm every week. And when you consider that they're doing that content for homework and it's that hard still, it's no wonder that their gatekeeping is getting worse and they're feeling like they need to upgrade their gems even higher to deal with the demand. And if you're constantly doing that homework and getting locked in jails by people with less gear, you're just gonna raise the bar, right? Like you're gonna be like, okay, fine, no more people with eights, no more people with sevens. I only want to see nines in my hard mode more doom raid or whatever. And to some degree, that's kind of warranted. They're not getting significant buffs. They haven't been getting significant buffs to their content. And so they are having a hard time doing their homework grades. Even just going and watching them do some of their homework grades, we're finishing all of our homework in 2 days, whereas KR players, even with a static, are getting jailed. You know what I mean? In their homework grades. And so I feel like it's just different, right? Like the world that they live in is just different, but also there is kind of like a natural like progression in MMOs. You shouldn't be able to make choices that actively hurt you. And so this is something that, like I said in the previous segments, this is something that players had decided to do for their own efficiency, their own, style of gameplay. Maybe they just want to feel overpowered, and so they want to go into this content with level 9 gems on their alts. Why is that a problem? It's not a problem actually. If you really take a step back and you look at it, it's not a problem that they're being gem efficient. However, it does kind of make this idea of, maybe it's raising gatekeeping and stuff like that. It's true and also not true, right? I think everyone, when a raid comes out, everyone has a pretty good idea of what the new quote unquote standard of gatekeeping is, right? You don't need to have seen somebody on their alt third glaver and be like, okay, that's the new style of gatekeeping. No, we all have a pretty general idea. If you have full sevens going into hard mode A gear, you're chilling. By the time you're doing hard mode Braille, maybe you got like a couple of eights or something, and you should be able to at least hit that like minimum damage threshold needed to clear the activity. And so once we understand what that minimum damage threshold is, especially that we have the Bible over here in the West, we have the DPS meter, right? It's very clear who is meeting that DPS or not, right? And so because of that, like things are just different over there. They don't have a DPS meter. They don't know who's meeting that damage threshold. They're not even, sure how to figure it out if someone is meeting the damage threshold. And honestly, like I wouldn't be able to tell you either. Without the damage meter, I wouldn't be able to look at somebody and be like, that dude's pumping. Because I can't tell you the number of times I've invited people to our groups and I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's going to the moon. And then he does nothing. We invited a 1700 last night who lost to a 1680 Aeromancer with worse gems. It wasn't like the Aeromancer like outgeared the crap out of him or anything. The Aeromancer had no books, no gems, or not no gems, but like regular gems, and still blew the 1700 out of the water. Would I have expected that beforehand? No, but that's the reality of the world we live in. You know what I mean? Like, it just is what it is. There's a very core part, I think, to all MMOs and really to like most games. And that's that there's this idea of making your own choices and playing how you want to play. Most good games allow you to choose how you want to play. Maybe you want to be a horizontal Andy. Maybe you're playing Final Fantasy 14 and you want to do trade skills instead of raiding. Like there's all these different choices in what you choose to prioritize in almost every good game you play, any game that has caught people's interest, it's the choices that they get to make. And so in this game, the choice that a lot of players made was to be efficient with their account. And that has allowed them to gain progress that other people couldn't, myself included, right? I don't have duplicate characters, but again, that's a choice I made. And I very much understood that there would be a benefit, right? Even back in the Argos days, people were saying, like, you should just run 6 of the same class because that's the most gem efficient way to do it. I didn't want to do that. Even back then, I never liked playing the same class. To me, that is boring. So that choice that I made detrimentally impacted me for the rest of my Lost Ark career. That is true. I shouldn't punish people who made a more optimal choice. And by suddenly switching their policy several years down the road, they are trying to do that. They are punishing those players that made the choice to choose more efficiency. And again, that's just kind of not okay. That's just not what you do as a good developer. It's not what you could do as a good, creator trying to make a system for your users to enjoy. Okay, so now I think this is a good time maybe to just talk about my overall feedback. In case you didn't get it, I think the system's pretty bad. Again, I only get to benefit from the system, but they're going about it the wrong way, and punishing players like this is never the right way to do things. Your idea should always try to be to make a system that, doesn't hurt people. And if it does hurt people, then you shouldn't make changes, I think, personally. That being said, sometimes you have to. This isn't one of those times, and I think this is one of those times where they could have made a different choice and it could have resulted in a lot more value. Maybe just a short thought experiment here, right? Stay with me for a second and let's just talk through the thought experiment for a moment. What if instead they had done the thing that pretty much everyone wants, right? Everyone wants roster wide gems. That's what people actually want. Maybe not like the giga whales, but I think that's because they're not quite realizing, the value that it would have. The only people that would negatively impact from roster wide gems would be the people who truly believe that they are quote unquote investing in gems. With roster wide gems, even the whales at the very top, even giga whales do not have full tens across every single character. They might have a character or two, maybe even three, but there's no whale, at least in our version of the game that I've seen, that has full tens on every single character. It's flat out too expensive still, even for whales. And so roster wide gems would allow them to have their full roster of gems for everything, full tens for every one of their characters that they play, and then also allow them to even sell the ones that they wouldn't need anymore. On the flip side, you have the dolphins, the casual players, and stuff like that. Sure, some of them might try and sell their gems, and it might crash the market of gems. Newsflash: they're crashing anyway. They're crashing with this system, right? So crashing the market isn't necessarily gonna. Nothing will stop the market from crashing. I'm convinced. I don't think there's anything that anyone can do to the gem system, touching it at all, or even mentioning it in a live stream, that wouldn't crash the gem market. There's just not. It's going to crash. But it was always going to crash. Again, let's just keep going with the thought experiment. Anyone who doesn't have tens would have not necessarily like, they wouldn't be putting their gold towards trying to get tens, but down the road as time goes on, they farm more gems. They might be interested in like, okay, well, if I get a level 9 gem, now I have suddenly a level 9 gem across all of my characters. So it has more value rather than getting a single gem. personally, as someone who doesn't spend money on power in this game, I think that that is a phenomenal system because, to be honest, I never like once I'm getting eights on my main, I'm done. You know what I mean? Like I ain't pushing for nines. I ain't pushing for tens. That's just never gonna happen. They're too expensive. So somebody who's on the lower end of spending, who's trying to increase their account, someone like me, I'm never even gonna consider it. Like maybe eventually I get like 1 9, maybe, but probably not, to be honest. I think that that's really kind of a shame. So if you turn gems into a roster wide thing, it would kind of add this extended over time system where you could slowly start getting gems, right? You can start getting, and most people would probably fuse in a lot of their alts gems, which I think would also be good because it would kind of get rid of some of the excess gems, but also maybe create a need for some of those gems in the short term. So in the short term, people will be looking like, okay, how do I get some high level gems? And there's always going to be people who are pushing the envelope, pushing forward. They're going to be interested in, like, okay, well, maybe I get 1 9. Well, maybe instead of 1 9, I already have nines. What if I get 1 10? There's always going to be a desire to kind of push the envelope a little bit further. How do I get more gear? How do I improve my account? And that's part of what like these long-term grinds are. I actually truly believe that roster-wide gems wouldn't even crash the market immediately. It would probably crash because immediately because of FOMO, right? That's always what ends up happening. Systems get, talked about or whatever, and then people are like, "Oh my gosh, they're gonna be worth nothing." And then, like the Golden Frog, like, "Oh my gosh, sell our relic books now. The Golden Frog's coming out next week." And then the Golden Frog comes out, and the relic books go back to the moon, right? We saw Adrenaline drop like 50K or something before Golden Frog, and then it went right back up. And there's a reason for that. And it's because the system didn't just die overnight. And I don't think that the gem market would either. People would suddenly have a reason. I would be looking at, okay, how do I fuse my gems and get at least full eights from here? And then maybe start working towards, like I said, like a 9 or 2. And maybe I have to buy another 8 to get a 9 or whatever it is, right? Like there's still ways that you can improve. And because of that, it wouldn't mean that the gems wouldn't have any value. It might mean that there's not a ton of demand after a few weeks and the market kind of pulls out. But like, I think that's going to happen in any system anyway. With the power of editing, I just wanted to also add one more thing because I was going back through this and thinking about it. Like, think about all the times that you've been jailed, right? Like that, like there would no longer be any more rats. There wouldn't be, anything that would be considered a rat would be a new player. If every person had their best gems across even their lowest level characters, content like on those lower ends, on those homework level ends, would become cake, right? And to be honest, I really think that that would be a good thing for the game. Sure, when the game is too easy, that's a bad thing. But nobody's looking at Behemoth and Aegir and Echidna and thinking, what would be great is if those raids were hard. Nobody wants to do hard homework raids. People want challenging, hard content to do on the upper end, the hardest raid in the game right now, or even like another piece of content like an aspirational content. But nobody wants a truly hard piece of homework to do across their characters every single week. I think that that would ultimately have been good for the game in the long term. And again, not just for me. Wales would get full tens on their whole freaking roster. That would be so cool. I can't even imagine what that would be like. And I would imagine that Wales would be super excited about that because not only do they get tens on their full roster, but then they get to sell their excess ones, right? Like that, they probably didn't even plan on getting full tens now. So eh, I think realistically, again, that's just a thought experiment. It's maybe not like, 100% accurate or whatever, but I'm just looking at it trying to think of like what would have been a different alternative. How could we do something that doesn't just target a specific group of people and try and punish them? Because that's what this system here is doing. This system here is targeting a specific group of people and punishing them for making the choices that they made. And I just don't think that that's the correct way to do it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. If you guys made it this far, feel free to interact with the video the way you normally would. And, feel free to come visit us over on Twitch. We talk about stuff. We play Lost Ark and gotcha games and all kinds of stuff. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a good one. Peace out, guys.